Before this video begins, I would just like to thank my Asbantium level patron, Fallon Cortez. Thank you for supporting the channel. Halloween is a time for horror. It's when we cozy up on the sofa and get ready to be scared of invaders from Mars, the hordes of the undead, or horrific creatures of the night. But not all horror is so simple and far-fetched. Sometimes the horror comes from our own lived experiences, things people have to face every time they step outside. And this is the aim of 2022's Watcher, written and directed by Chloe Okuno. This psychological thriller follows American couple Julie and Francis move to Bucharest in Romania, only for Julia to find herself constantly watched by a mysterious figure across the street, forcing her into a life of isolation, paranoia and fear as her whole world crumbles around her. Watcher debuted to critical acclaim, to the extent that my Diamond level patron supporter Glenna Clark commissioned me to review it. So what makes this movie so compelling and powerful? Well, if you've seen it and are not part of the majority demographic of my channel, you already know. But for the rest of you, let's find out. One of the quickest ways to introduce psychology in a movie is through the setting, an immediate marker of visual language and intention. Right from the beginning, Julia is thrown into somewhere that's initially colourful with the bright lights outside at night, but immensely alien as she doesn't speak the language. Street signs she can't read make things disorienting and keep her from feeling free to explore. Her inability to understand taxi drivers, the landlady, or even dinner parties further introduce a sense of claustrophobia because she's forced to rely on her husband Francis, who works long hours, only isolating her further. The film quickly goes from a sense of adventure and willingness to learn and engage to a hopeless sense of loneliness and aimlessness. And this is all captured early on with the setting alone. It only takes 15 minutes to create a startling sense of unease for Julia that only worsens throughout the movie as everything gets greyer. There's a sense of sterile brutalism about the environment she's placed within, and the camera angles always frame her in such voyeuristic shots. We see her from a distance, through doors and windows, even across streets. It never truly feels like she belongs or feels comfortable. There's absolutely no sense of privacy or safety no matter where Julia is. She's always visible whether she wants to be or not. Right from the beginning, there's an uncomfortable sense of voyeurism as Julia and Francis move into their flat and start getting intimate. The camera painfully slowly zooms out, while always keeping them in focus thanks to this big window. It denies them the privacy of intimacy, a really clever use of a sex scene because we know it's something we shouldn't be seeing. And this alone immediately sets the tone of intrusion. It's masterful storytelling. Watcher begins as a very slow burn story with a steady escalation. Julia sees the titular Watcher very early on, but it takes her multiple days to finally mention something to Francis. And even then, she drops it, almost herself downplaying it because, well, she's also people watching. The next big beat is the discovery of a serial killer named the Spider, who is infamous for decapitating women, something that only serves to further craft a mounting feeling of tension and unease. And that's how Okuno perfectly develops a sense of horror. It's not with shocks or jump scares, it's with a sense of dread and the invasion of personal space. There's a really especially chilling scene in the almost empty cinema that makes a brilliant use of sound. Someone sitting directly behind Julia, causing her to hyperfocus on his breathing, almost feeling it on the back of her neck. It's a moment of pure unadulterated dread, only deepened when he follows her to the supermarket, which feels cramped and unsafe even with all these lights and people. The fear and panic mounts, but Julia runs from it, cutting short any sense of confirmation or confrontation, especially as there's no clear CCTV proof to validate her fears. There's almost a social pressure for Julia to doubt herself, especially when Francis himself downplays her concern. And this is how the film plays almost a push and pull game. It pushes and pushes at Julia, showing us these unsettling experiences before pulling back and offering rational explanations that make her seem like she's overreacting or jumping at shadows. There's always a sense of creeping plausibility no matter what, rather than the traditional big plot twists and progression of movies. It's not a slasher horror movie, the whole film maintains the same pace of banality almost, just sowing more and more seeds of unease to fracture Julia's sense of safety and sanity. Without seeing the perspectives of any other character, we're trapped in her same position of not being able to prove anything. And this is how Watcher weaponizes normality and ordinary life. There's a purposeful sense of nothing really happening for the majority of the movie. We see lifeless scenes of eating breakfast with distant sounds of the city. Footsteps are deliberately mixed loudly into the sound design, blurring the line between mundane and ominous because we can often hear without seeing. One of the best uses of sounds comes as Julia is alone late at night, only to hear frantic knocking at her door. The music here is almost non-existent, just a low hum that emphasizes isolation and builds tension. It's only the landlady asking about her cat which has gone missing, but it goes to show just how vulnerable and scared Julia is throughout. The only real solace she finds is her neighbour Irina, who seems to be the only person she can really understand or relate to. Irina is bold and fearless, confident in a way Julia wishes she could be. Not intimidated by her angry ex-boyfriend, like Julia is intimidated of everyone around her. In fact, it's her night drinking with Irina that inspires Julia to test the Watcher by waving at him to see if he's truly looking at her. It's a moment of defiance and confidence to assuage her concerns, only for him to wave back, bringing all that dread bubbling back up to the surface, especially when the well-meaning Francis once again downplays her worries with his claims of rationality, something that causes a fracture in their relationship because all she wants is for him to believe her, something he cannot do because he doesn't experience the world in the same way that she does, which I'll get onto later. I really love how this relationship plays out. Both actors commit wonderfully to their roles as their bond splinters and their love fades as they simply cannot agree with one another. Their perspectives and their worldviews are simply too different, and Julia finds herself pursuing answers alone, only furthering her own isolation and sense of sanity slipping. Francis isn't a caricature or a villain, which makes his part in the story all the more realistic and frustrating. At every turn, you can understand his skepticism and doubt because there always seems to be an explanation. But because we see the narrative through the lens of Julia's fear and isolation, his minimization becomes too calm and too casual. He's willing to do anything to help except believe her, because he needs a level of proof that can only really come when it's too late. Julia is a fantastically real and sensible character. She does everything right. She's not a horror protagonist who refuses to call the police and makes a litany of bad decisions. At every step, she trusts the system until it fails her and she has to take matters into her own hands. Everyone's refusal to believe Julia only hardens her resolve to be proven right, so it becomes almost an obsession of its own. Julia herself becomes an aggressor, following the Watcher to his workplace in search of answers. In her obsession, she becomes the same kind of stalker she herself is fearing, to the extent that he even calls the police on her for following him everywhere. It's that perfect sense of disorienting the viewer, and almost encouraging us to side with people like Francis who doubt Julia. It challenges us with the same kind of struggle Francis has, because it creates such reasonable doubt on purpose. Even Irina struggles, telling Julia it's better to never know than to be raped or killed with the words, "I told you so," on their lips. It's not downplaying Julia's fear in the same way, but it's still a way to further isolate her and heighten her anxiety further than before, because Irina is like the one person she trusts, and even she's like, well, yeah, he probably is stalking you, but hopefully he isn't. And that's all she really says. And Julia's sense of spiraling only gets worse when she becomes convinced she heard screaming and a struggle in Irina's flat, only for her to find nothing, turning her landlady and neighbours against her for making a fuss and trouble and waking everyone up. When everyone is telling Julia she's crazy and overdramatic, how can she even trust herself? And that's the ultimate psychological horror of Watcher. First, Julia notices she's being watched, then she notices she's being followed. Then she hears there's a serial killer on the loose. Next, she tries to follow and find the Watcher and even goes to his flat, only for all these investigations to end inconclusively without a satisfying answer or resolution. It's no surprise that Julia begins to doubt herself because, as I said, there's always a rational answer presented by every male character around her, and by extension, the movie itself. It doesn't just make Julia doubt, it makes us doubt her. Because like I said, Daniel, the Watcher, even accuses her of following him and gets the police involved. And Julia's doubt is strengthened further when the spider is captured and turns out to be someone completely different. Francis even turns Julia's fear into a joke at a work event, and he victimizes himself in the climactic moment of their relationship breaking. Julia becomes more alone than ever, with no warmth, no trust, no hope. She's all by herself in more ways than one. It's right then that she encounters Daniel on the metro, the pair having their first and only proper conversation of the movie. Daniel is almost impossibly normal and ordinary. There's a stiff, awkward element of Burn Gorman's portrayal that feels too real and natural. He just seems like a regular, socially awkward and lonely guy who looks after his elderly father and simply watches out of the window for a sense of escapism. Once again, there's plausible deniability and a sense of doubt for everything Julia encounters. But it's actually this moment that solidifies her fears and certainty that this man is dangerous. Before he even develops a threatening edge in his voice demanding for an apology, she sees what seems to be a person's head in his plastic bag. The music ramping up with strings and the camera zooming in on her face, building that tension so quickly and effectively. It prompts her final decision to leave. Another sensible choice for a horror character that finally tries to do the right thing. But before she can, she finds Irina's body, decapitated inside her own flat as Daniel attacks, validating Julia's fears from all along in the most horrific and pulse-racing way possible. Her worst fears manifest as he almost anticlimactically slits her throat without any fanfare or build-up when there's no big speech. There's not some big, exciting struggle, there's no climactic music. It just happens, and all she can do is try to crawl to Irina's gun to no avail. It's such a brilliant climax of pure dread and helplessness. Julia was right all along, and nobody listened to her, only for her to now become a victim, just as she had tried so desperately to avoid the whole time. But then the movie does something I really love. As Daniel goes to leave, Julia shoots him, having used her acting skills to play dead to give her this chance to kill him and escape. And the movie ends not with the protagonist heroically vanquishing evil and triumphing, but merely surviving, as she gives a lasting, withering look at her husband, the man that should have trusted her all along. It goes back to those words from Irina and not wanting to have to be in a position where you can say, "I told you so." It's such a striking visual that sticks with you, that tired vindication. Julia could still die from her wounds, she might live, but even if she does, a piece of her died in that flat. There is no happy ending for her, because even if she leaves Francis and Bucharest behind, that fear and helplessness will haunt her far longer, knowing how close she was to death and how everyone she trusted to help her was just as complicit by not believing her. And that's the truth of Watcher. It's a window into real life. Almost everyone who watches my videos is, according to YouTube stats, male. So I want you to think about something. When you're walking in an isolated area, it doesn't matter if it's day or night, how many times have you seen women on the phone when they're alone? They don't just do that for the sake of it. They do that because of what Julia experiences in this movie, because that's what nearly every woman of every age has to experience at some point in their life. No woman thinks every man is a danger, but any man could be a danger. That was the whole point of the whole man or bear conversation from a few years ago. The majority of women would rather be alone with a bear because at least then there's certainty of its intentions. But if they were trapped with a man, there are more possibilities and very few of them are good. And it's that casual disbelief and doubt from other people that gets so many women killed. Just like we see in this movie. Hypothetically speaking, a woman could be walking alone at night knowing she has a 99% chance of not being raped or murdered by the man walking behind her. But that 1% becomes the scariest thing on earth for the exact same reasons Irina explains in the movie. You don't want to find out. You don't want to be proven right to fear that 1%. The risk is simply too much no matter the odds. And in the real world, the odds are unfortunately much, much higher than 1%. Director Chloe Okuno and lead actor Micah Monroe have both gone on record about how much of the film is drawing upon their personal experiences. It's a movie about taking women seriously when they think they're in danger. The paranoia and hypervigilance women experience is often rational, and that's how they approach the movie. Okuno specifically explained that women know they're going to be doubted, their concerns are going to be minimized, and it's about the frustration that comes from such doubt. Not even just from men, but often from other women too, creating such an isolating experience. Watch It is a prime example of using horror for important social commentary and messaging. It's a message about gender dread and gaslighting. The ending emphasizes that the threat against Julia was never just Daniel alone. It's the culture that puts her in that danger to begin with. Throughout, she's regularly reaching out to others for help. She tells people about him, she gets the police involved, but nobody actually does anything until it's too late. And she only narrowly manages to save herself alone. She knows what she's experiencing and what she's seeing, but the men in the story don't understand what it's like to have that hypervigilance and that fear. They're not used to it because it's not something they have to deal with. So even though Francis is often well-meaning, he still serves to endanger his own wife by not taking her seriously enough, despite realistically there not being much more he could even do because of the overall system and culture itself. A system which uses laws and policies made by men to try and protect women, with very little input from the actual people being victimized on a daily basis. Institutional caution and skepticism may as well be complicity because everything Julia tries is deemed not enough, just like how many cases of stalking and threats have been ignored until a horrific crime has already been committed. That's why the ending refuses to offer traditional catharsis, because such an ending shouldn't need to happen in the first place. And that, again, was personal experience Monroe drew upon, because she herself has dealt with having close friends and partners not believe her concern, just like with Francis and Julia in this movie. He's supposed to be there for her, but he isn't. And before any kind of culture war debate erupts, Okuno earnestly tried to avoid making Francis a quote-unquote dick, because he's not a bad person, and she doesn't even consider his dismissiveness as his main failing. It all simply comes down to his inability to empathize with her, because he doesn't understand that this kind of vigilance and fear is built up through years of small moments that add up, or just one bad experience that can create lasting fear and paranoia. He just hasn't been there himself. And again, like I said, it's not that all men are dangerous, it's that any man could be. And Daniel is one of those men, which was a gut feeling Julia had this whole time because she does have that lifetime of experiences, giving her good reason to be scared throughout. The scariest part about Watcher is the fact it's just real life. Watcher is an incredible movie, and its chilling sense of reality makes it one of the most unsettling horror movies you could ever watch. It's not based on a true story, it's based on 1,000 lived experiences. The tone is off-puttingly consistent with such a slow build that escalates suddenly at the end when Julia finally earns the right to be scared. It's like a shout after the movie whispers for so long. And the sound design throughout is deliberate too. There's a mundanity with how conversations trail off and how lights and doors click into silence. The whole visual and audio direction of the film intensifies the feeling of isolation. Even the music is a very low hum and a pulse for most of the narrative, rarely bringing in strings or sharper moments because it almost represents Julia's fear being downplayed. It's not a traditional horror movie with overly dramatic and intense music or jump scares. It's so grounded and quiet, and that only serves to constantly create seeds of doubt that mess with your own head, even when you trust Julia's experiences. It's masterful for creating such uncertainty and crafting multiple layers of psychological horror. Julia's only source of warmth and trust throughout the movie is Irina, whose disappearance is the final blow for Julia's sense of self. The threat and danger finally breaching her own safe haven in her own apartment block. It's a violation of her last and only refuge. Because the majority of Watch It is almost like a bottle episode, taking place mostly in this single apartment, which is a brilliantly normal staging ground for such a real yet horrifying story. Watch It is a sublime horror movie because it truly delivers the genuine feeling of fear so many people really do feel, and it stands in defiance with the statement that yes, this fear is justified. And I think that's the most powerful part of it. But that's all from me for now. I want to once again thank Glenna Clark for commissioning this review. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it educated you a bit. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.
And I'd just like to thank my Asbantium level patron, Fallon Cortez,
My Diamond level patrons, Sapphic Flame and Valtar,
and all my gold level patrons, Daniel Shillito and James Alayula Waterhouse. Thank you for supporting the channel.